Everyone, Alistair Gold here. Sorry I've been away for a little while. That might be a good thing for some people, but no, I've had a few days off, got a few more days off to come, but just wanted to have a quick chat because obviously may all be very well me having some time off, but we are slap bang in transfer window time, and obviously looks like we're about to get a transfer over the line at Tottenham Hotspur. So let's have a chat about it all. Let's start with the main man right now, Pierre-Emile Hojbjerg, as I've been told to pronounce it, Hojbjerg. It's one of those where I've seen some people getting a little bit, oh, is it that great? Is it that big a signing? Why is everyone getting excited? I think the key thing about him is that he's pretty much just exactly what Mourinho wants, and that's the most important thing right now. We talk about Tottenham Hotspur buying players over the years and maybe buying players that the fans want or the fans wanting certain transfer targets gone for. I think the most important thing is when a manager identifies a player and he wants them, you go out and get them. It doesn't always work, like on Dembele last summer. That was Pochettino's top target. Hasn't worked yet. Hopefully it will in the long term, but it doesn't always work. But, Mourinho's been very clear. Spurs sounded out Southampton about Hojbjerg in January. It wasn't the right time to move. Now it is. He's doing his medical today at Hotspur Way this morning. That should probably, by the time I'm filming all this right now, have all been done. And, you'd expect you'll get that signing soon. It's one of those where you'd imagine they'll want to tie up both sides of it with Kyle Walker-Peters going the other way. And what I also find fascinating about, there's two sides to this. There's the player and Mourinho. If you look at some of the quotes, I was reading an interview Hojbjerg did maybe a few months back with, I think it was on a podcast, and every word this man says sounds like a Mourinho signing. It's all about the team. It's all about, if you watch him, he's not one of these guys that is going to grab headlines. He did get the most ball recoveries in the Premier League last season. I suppose technically this season, last season, however you want to see it. And that's what Tottenham have lacked. Someone that could just break down attacks and put them on their way. He's not going to play amazing through balls. He's not going to score goals. Southampton fans I know said, don't even let him shoot if he gets near the penalty area. They will end up over the stands. But in terms of that role of just getting up and down the pitch, breaking up the play of the other team and giving the ball straight back to the players who can do the damage, that's absolutely what he is. And also, he's a leader. He's only just turned 25 the other day, but he is a player who wants better and better and better. And, apparently he can be an utter pain in the backside if they're losing. He will demand the most. I think in this interview I read it, he kind of came across saying, like, if I've got to start a confrontation to get people going, I'll sacrifice myself to do that. I'll look like the bad guy. He said, ultimately, I just want people to do the best. Guardiola loved him at Bayern Munich, but it just didn't kind of work out for him there. It was maybe too big a step too soon. But Southampton, it's very difficult. It's very important to kind of differentiate between the different kind of Southampton fans who are coming out. Some of my fellow colleagues where I work are Southampton fans, and I think it's quite interesting to see. There's some, obviously, when you're getting rid of a player, you'll always remember probably the worst bits. That's often the way to do it. We did it with Eriksen. Eriksen's last 18 months to a year or so weren't great. People probably, that's what you remember, and it makes you feel better about losing a player. However, in the time before that, he was one of the best Premier League midfielders out there. He just was. And I think with Hojbjerg, I've seen some of that. It's like, Spurs are getting the worst end of the deal on this. But then I've seen other Southampton fans said, look, for exactly what Mourinho wants, he's perfect for it. And I think that for me is so crucial. And I think you've got to look at the financial aspects as well. I know people hate to do this, but, £3 million. That's what I've been told will be the difference between the fee for Hojbjerg and Kyle Walker-Peters. Whatever fees you see come out in the media in the coming days, the difference is $3 million. And I've been told that from a couple of different people who would know. So $3 million on, obviously it's $3 million cash is the way to probably look at it. It's not a £3 million deal. Of course it's not. You're losing one of your assets as well. But in terms of, in a time when cash flow is tight with all of the issues that have gone on this year, to spend $3 million and get the exact target you wanted back in January, I think that's a really good deal. And it'd be really interesting to see the mentality he brings in. He absolutely fits in. I've probably spoken about this in videos before. I know I've written about it. But Mourinho, when I asked him about 3-4 weeks ago Are you looking to bring in cheaper, experienced players, older players, so you've got that winning mentality and leadership? And he said, no, I'm not going in that direction. It doesn't matter how old you are. I want those leaders. We're not going to go in that older direction. And Hojbjerg absolutely nails that. He is a leader. He was Southampton's captain at only 24 until obviously they took it off him when he said he wasn't going to sign a new contract. And I think that's exactly the kind of player. And I think Spurs get a lot of criticism over their transfers, and rightly so, especially in the 2 transfer windows where they didn't buy anyone. But in this aspect, they've gone out, they've gone in, got the player, the main target they wanted, and they're going to get him before pre-season starts. And that's massive. It means Mourinho and he can work together. We know he's going to be a key, likely starter in that team, and he can now work on him throughout pre-season, and he can work with the other midfielders. And, it may, we said it before, it may unlock the likes of Dembele. It may give Spurs that little bit more kind of, if you've got a guy that can recover the ball that much in matches, it unlocks the likes of Dembele to maybe not have as much pressure from Mourinho to have that defensive role as well. But we'll see. But no, I thought it was really, really interesting that Spurs have gone and done that, before pre-season. They did that with Dembele last year, so we can't say it doesn't ever happen. But I think that was an important building block. So I'm really interested to see how he does. It's not long, straight back into action next month. So it'll be really interesting to see how he fits in and hopefully really well. And a really key thing I wanted to make very clear to people, and people don't like to hear this. I say it in a lot of transfer windows. This isn't about finance. Don't worry, I'm not going down that route yet. But people get a little bit annoyed when I remind them about the homegrown regulations that Spurs always fall foul of. People always reply to me, oh, but what about other clubs? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter about other clubs. This is always seems to be a response when I talk about the foreign player limits and the homegrown rules in the side. It doesn't matter about other clubs. Spurs, focus on Spurs. They have to comply with it. And once again, they're having issues with it. And let me explain. So what it is in Europa League, we'll say now, it's depressing, isn't it, when we've been talking about Champions League, but European squads, you can only have at the most 17 non-British players. So 17 foreign players is what you're allowed out of your 25-man squad. In the Premier League, it's also 17. However, with Spurs, as we'll come in a minute, it's slightly different because of a certain Welshman. So when Hojbjerg joins, Spurs will have 17 exactly in their European squad, foreign players. They will hit that limit. In the Premier League squad, they will have 16. And the reason I say that is Ben Davies, weirdly, because he's Welsh, UEFA see him as having worked in a foreign nations academy system. That's how they describe it. So in the European squad, he's a foreign player. In the Premier League squad, he's not. He is considered a British player. So that's why you get one more spot in that squad. I mean, weirdly, like Eric Dyer. Eric Dyer went through the Portuguese academy system. So he's seen as foreign in both squads. It's an utter pain in the backside for Spurs, but it is one that they have to stick to. And the other guy who now comes into it is Juan Foyth. Juan Foyth last year managed to get into the B list for European squad, which is kind of young players under 21. However, he's now 22 and he just missed essentially being with the squad for 3 years before he turned 21, or in the season that he turned 21. So he's now back as a foreign player, and that creates another problem. I had someone this morning saying, but Vorm and Vertonghen have left. They have, and that still only got Spurs back to 17 with Hojbjerg. There would have been 19 if those two guys were there. This is the issue, you see. So what Spurs have to do, this is what I'm being told, is that Spurs are going to have to operate this transfer window on a one-out, one-in system. They can't afford to stockpile foreign players again. It's just been a massive issue. You probably remember Foyth. I remember getting left out when Lucas Moura came in. Wanyama was left out last year and he was eventually sold anyway. So they can't just go out and get very excited about the transfer targets that we all would like to see and then not be able to play. Most of them, they've got to sell players, foreign players. You're looking at, because that's the thing. I think if you look at the various players you'd expect to leave this summer, Cole Walker-Peters, Danny Rose, Cameron Carter-Vickers, Luke Amos will probably go. All British. I know Carter-Vickers is technically a USA international, but born in England, Southend born, I think he was. So instantly, you're not helping yourself. So then you have to start looking at, Foyth is probably going to have to go out, whether it's loan or sale to raise some funds. Serge Aurier, if you want to bring in another right, perhaps we'll talk about, I'm going to go through all the positions and talk about transfers in a moment, but I think you have to then look at stuff, and sometimes players, even ones that maybe we didn't want to lose, you start looking at it and you think, ugh, you might actually have to lose these foreign players if you want to bring in another one, or say you lose a foreign winger, midfielder, right back, say, and then you bring in a homegrown option in their position, and that frees you up for another foreign player spot. It's one of these where we're probably so used to playing FIFA and Football Manager, although in Football Manager you do actually have to obviously keep within the squad limits and all that. And you just kind of, I want to buy, I want to buy, I want to buy. But actually, in reality, it's so difficult, and Spurs always fall into this trap. We're seeing Man City buying Ake, and a lot of that is to do with those sort of things. You've got to keep within those limits, and Spurs are just really, really struggling, especially, like I say, when all the players that look like they're heading out are going to be homegrown ones, it's going to make it even more awkward. So when I see someone say, sell Winks, and you think, no, you can't sell Winks as well. It doesn't make any sense. So we're going to come on to that because we're going to talk through transfer stuff. Hopefully going to squeeze it all in, but we're going to talk about that as well. One other thing I just find really interesting as well. Having been off for a few days, I've been able to kind of just sit back and see what kind of social media is like with transfers and stuff like that. I just find it really interesting seeing certain journalists getting, not attacked, but people take the mickey out of journalists in transfer season because it's a tough season to do it in. You're getting a lot of information from various sources, and it's not always right. Of course, it's not. I say it's not even also right. You can say a player, is going to happen, not going to happen, but you can say a club are interested in a player, and that's very much true, and then the deal just doesn't happen to go that way. There's so many factors. The way I always look at it is I'm not really interested in being the first to report something. I'm interested in being right, and it's always been my way. I started off as a news journalist, and that was always the key thing. It was never write something just from one source. Always confirm it with another source before you go for it, and that of course you'll get the odd thing not right. You'll get the odd thing that people will tell you, and a couple of people will tell you, and still it doesn't end up happening or something. Or there can be a surprise. Something happens within a club that surprises everyone and changes the whole dynamic of what's happening, of course. But for me, it's always been important about getting that second source on stuff. And it's really funny. I was rewatching this brilliant show that I like called The Newsroom. On, I think it's HBO in America, it's Sky Atlantic here, and the end of one episode just absolutely summed it up for me. There was a governor shot in the head in Texas or something, and all the other news outlets were saying, that she's dead, rest in peace, and they were going through all their kind of eulogies and things like that, and they just wouldn't go with it because they'd only had one source had told them this, and even though the powers at the company were saying, go for it, you've got to say this, you've got to report this, we're losing viewers all the time. And then suddenly, just as they were, starting to bend under pressure, they got a second. Someone in the hospital said she's not dead; she's about to go into surgery, and they were the only ones reporting the right thing. And I think for me, that's what journalism's about. Maybe social media creates this need to get out there first and say, "I've heard this, I've been told this, blah blah blah." I think the most important thing in today's world, and we see it not just in football, in so many other things, it's about being right and giving people the right information. Like I say, it doesn't happen 100% of the time. You're always going to have those moments where it all goes a bit pear-shaped. But on the whole, I think that's key, what we try and get out there. So I know people get frustrated when I write stuff, and sometimes they're slightly downbeat about what will happen in a scenario, and they're like, Mr. Doom or stuff like that, Doom-monger and all that. But ultimately, that's what it's about. And, unfortunately, in my position, I do talk to a lot of people within the club and other clubs and agents, scouts, things like that. But ultimately, Spurs will do transfers. Don't worry. That will happen. That will happen. We're about to see one get over the line, and there will be more. There will be more. So let's kind of get straight into it. Let's go. I'm going to go, actually, before I go into positions, let's just get Gareth Bale out there. I know there's going to be people watching this that are going to say, Gareth Bale. They don't all talk like that, but there's this real kind of love for Gareth Bale coming back among a certain section of fans, and I have to address it so many times, and probably when Gareth Bale's 40 or 45, I'll be doing exactly the same thing, either as a player or as a potential manager, although I can't imagine he'd ever want to stay in football once he's done with it. Just know. I think, look, how do I put this in a polite way? I think in a world where Spurs could get Gareth Bale for an incredible reduction in his wages, on loan perhaps, maybe somewhere in that hemisphere of thinking about doing stuff, that might happen. But in the real world, the guy's on 600,000, I think it's maybe 650,000 a week at Real Madrid. That's 3 times as much as Harry Kane earns and more. And his agent even said only a couple of months ago, he laughed when Spurs was suggested as a loan club. He was like, he just wouldn't go there. That's not what's going to happen. I think it's one of these romantic things. He has his injuries. He's such an un-Spurs-like signing now. He's older, he's injury prone. He's a brilliant player. Don't get me, of course he'd come to Tottenham and he would be fantastic, hopefully. But it's just so financially difficult. It's not even in Spurs' world to do that deal. This is why he's linked with China. This is why he's not linked with the big European clubs. He is only linked with these super silly financial clubs that can afford him. And Spurs are right down the bottom of clubs that would even look at him. You know, if you look at, I don't know, Willian and Coutinho, who are going to end up, you know, potentially both at Arsenal, certainly Willian. Spurs can't compete in that financial world. How are they going to sign Gareth Bale? You know, the Willian, there's been rumours, and again, this isn't reporting anything, there's only rumours that there's like a huge signing on fee for him. Huge. Tottenham don't do that. They just don't. So Gareth Bale, yeah, I think it's one of those, if it happened, it would be the greatest shock and surprise, and I would love it. But I just can't see it. I just can't. Love to be surprised on that one, though. Right, so let's get into right backs. Right backs. There was a lot of talk about Zeki Celik. Is it Celik? I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to, you know, that will go in my list of badly pronounced names. I saw some reports saying he's Spurs' priority right back. He's not. From people, you know, a few places I've been told, people have told me, he's on their list of right backs they're looking at, the Lille right back. He's not their top priority on the list, but he's certainly, if other ones don't pan out, then he's a potential. You know, they've obviously looked at Max Aarons all season. Timothy Castagna, is it Castagna? Castagna, I think it's pronounced. Atalanta guy who can play left back or right back. And has actually made quite a big deal in the press a little while back about how Spurs were coming in for him, that he would love to go. You know, certainly doing the PR relations, no harm at all. Those are 3 of the players on that list they're looking at. I think there's quite a list in every position. There's quite a list because of the way Spurs operate. If you were to pin me down and because if I was to pin down and be asked who's the main priority, I'd imagine. And this is, you know, again, this I haven't been told. All I've been told is that Celik is not the priority on top of that list. My gut would tell me Max Aarons, purely because of that homegrown issue. And the fact is, if Serge Aurier were to leave for AC Milan, which, you know, AC Milan are pushing for, and reportedly so is Aurier, then you replace him with a British player, and that frees you up to bring in another foreign player. You know, I've seen Aarons getting a bit of flack. I think he's a very young guy. Was he 20? First season in the Premier League. I think he's just going to be learning. I think probably one of the ticks against him, or crosses as it were, is obviously his height. But I think he's a guy that can be taught a lot. And I think Spurs see that, and I think he fits Spurs' transfer profile perfectly. So, yeah, I'd keep an eye on that one. I think a lot depends on the price, and I think that's why they have these lists, because if they can't get, you know, the Southampton price came down and down and down, as it had to with his contract. And I think with Aarons, a similar thing would have to happen. Apologies for being very hot. It's a very hot day. So apologies for any sweat. I hope none of you have like 3D on this. But yeah, so I think there's a few good options out there. I wouldn't be stunned if Aurier does go. And then the question becomes, do you buy 2 right backs, or do you bring in 1 and then have Tanganga cover? You know, I think probably Tanganga is good enough to cover as a right back, and then let you get away with that slightly. So yeah, they're the kind of main right backs, but this is Tottenham, and I'll come back to this again later, but this is Tottenham, and they try and do a lot of their work under the radar. They really do, and this is why it's quite funny how I talk about this with my colleagues that cover other clubs. Other clubs' targets are so well known, they're so obvious, and it's not like, well, I hope not. I hope it's not just, you know, better journalists who can get undercover and find these things so much. I think it's just more that Spurs know they can't compete financially, so they have to really do a deal on the quiet up to a certain point that when the media does become aware of it, it's too advanced for other clubs really to mess it up for them. You know, we saw it with Steven Bergwijn in January. That deal just bang, within 3-4 days it was done, and no one before that had really been talking about Bergwijn as a target. Spurs had watched him for a while. I think we'd said that before, but suddenly PSV let them know, or his agent let them know he'd become available, bang, and it happened. And I do feel there's probably another few right-backs that we haven't heard of yet that are going to... I think there was... I know Emerson, the Barcelona one, has come up in reports recently, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see a couple more like that in the next few weeks. So let's look at strikers. Callum Wilson, for me, screams out as fitting that homegrown box. He's 28, got experience in the Premier League. Yes, he's had previous injury issues, played most of this season. I think he only missed one Premier League game. He didn't have the greatest of times in front of goal, but I think, we saw what Bournemouth were like. They had a tough year. It's all about game time, I suppose this is similar with Aarons. Would Max Aarons come in as a backup to Aurier? Probably not. Would he come in as a potential first choice? Yes. The same, but with Wilson, it's a bit different in terms of, he could go to maybe a lower Premier League club and probably play more, but this could be his last kind of big move at 28. And, to have said you've played under Mourinho, to play at Tottenham, and I think his versatility means that he probably would also get some game time playing with Kane, because he can also come out wide if need be as well. Again, I do worry that people sometimes, they play their FIFA and stuff like that, and it's not just computer games, it's anything. You watch a lot of foreign football and you'll want to see these sexy, cool signings come in. And I don't think players like Wilson, maybe they're slightly done down, but if you can get an England international, there's a reported somewhere between 10 and 15 million relegation release clause. If you get him for 10 or 15 million, I think that's a bargain, quite frankly. We're always calling out for someone that can do the job, and the trouble is if you don't go for someone that's got experience in the Premier League, then you're starting to look at a Vincent Janssen, someone who might cost you a little bit of money and have done really well in another league, but actually in the Premier League struggles to adapt. And we know with Dembele how difficult it can be for players, even the best, the ones who look phenomenal in another league, they can struggle. They can struggle in the Premier League. It's so different. So I think for me, Wilson absolutely ticks a lot of the boxes. And then, if you are looking foreign abroad, you've got Habib Diallo, the Met striker. They looked at him in January, Spurs. Good young striker, youngish, I think. I think he was in mid-20s. Done very well for Mets this year. Again, though, it's a bit of a gamble. And again, the foreign player thing, you'd have to then lose another foreign player to fit him into your squad. The one, I'd like to see him maybe look at someone like Ollie Watkins at Brentford, who had a terrific season. He's 24 years old, scored 26 goals in the Championship. For me, if you could get him, I think this is the issue is the British premium. Some talk about him and Benrahma being available for 25 million each from Brentford, and if you're paying 25 million for a player who then still is a gamble because he hasn't played in the Premier League, I think that's one where Spurs might start to look away. They did the same with Jared Bowen. He was a guy that the price just kept going up, and eventually West Ham went for him. Spurs went for Jack Clarke instead because he was cheaper and a bit younger. And I think Bowen's is a good player, and I think he'll get better next season. But another one they've really looked at is Milik at Napoli. We've spoken about him before. Had a decent season. He's kind of been in and out of the team since the restart. He's been linked with Juventus, Atletico Madrid. His agent came out quite strongly and said, look, he'll sign if Kane leaves, as if, and we've heard this before. Osimhen that went to, Osimhen went to, where did he go to? Go to Napoli. I'm trying to think now. It's Napoli or Lazio. It's gone completely out of my head. But that was another one whose agent said, if Kane's there, he's not going to get game time, he's not coming. And I think that would be a big obstacle with Milik. I think you'll have to offer him or say to him he will get a certain amount of game time. That's difficult with Kane. But Milik's certainly one that Mourinho likes. There was Vedat Muriqi, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, who's the Kosovan striker who plays for Fenerbahce. He's another one Spurs looked at January. Whether that happens this summer, I don't know. Unless it was a bargain deal, that one seems slightly more unlikely for me. I think, again, it's a bit more of a gamble type striker. For me, as I said, Wilson leaps out. I think Diallo's a talent. I'd love to see him have a look at Watkins, but I think the price should be against him. And Milik is certainly one they've looked at. Apologies, you might hear a helicopter going overhead. Had to open some windows because, as you can see, I'm rather hot. So apologies if you get any background noise at all. So they're centre-backs. There's other ones that, maybe lower down the list. You've got as a backup, someone like Troy Deeney, an experienced guy, has knee issues though. I think that would probably count against him. But if you're looking a bit like Spurs were in January, just very much for someone that can come in and take the load off Kane. I don't think Deeney's the worst shout in the world. You know, he's a guy that, again, I think people would really take the mickey out of that being a signing, but actually on paper, I don't think, in reality, I don't actually think it would be the worst deal in the world as someone that comes in and just gives you that little bit of extra cover at striker. But I think they'll go for others first. I think Deeney would be way down a list, and he's an older player. Doesn't fit the Mourinho thing that he was telling me anyway. Centre-backs. Kim Min-jae is the obvious one. You know, South Korean centre-back, 23 years old, very talented young man. My colleague Sungmo Lee who works for Goal Korea, he's raved about him to me, told me he's, you know, the greatest kind of defensive talent of the generation, really, certainly this century. The issue, you know, is the Beijing side he plays for really don't want to let him go. I think he's got a little injury at the moment, so he hasn't played the last couple of games. But that's the real issue there, is that they don't really want to let him go. I'm sure he'd love to link up with Son at Spurs, but it's a case of, again, finding that right fee. And once again, and I'm going to use this so much it's going to bore the hell out of you, the foreign player issue. You know, obviously you would have to then lose a foreign player, perhaps Foyth, or like I say, the one out, one in mentality. Foyth goes, foreign defender goes out, foreign defender can come in. As him, there's obviously the Inter guy, Milan Skriniar. I'm going to pronounce that badly. He's been kind of linked as being lobbed in with the Ndombele deal. But as I've said, Spurs at the moment do not want to sell Ndombele. They want to look at him, give him another year, let him adapt. You know, let's not beat around the bush. The relationship between Mourinho and Ndombele hasn't been perfect. Ndombele, no doubt, is probably thoroughly fed up, and the lack of minutes he got. You know, he got praise when he came back from the break, the restart. Got loads of praise from Mourinho for all the work he'd done, and then didn't play for the next 2 matches. Got a couple of minutes. I think I worked out he got about 60 minutes in total across the final 9 games. He's not going to be happy. Of course, he's probably going to want to go somewhere where he's going to play non-stop. But Tottenham believe in him. They believe there's a long-term future for him. I think it'll be interesting to see now over the final months of the season whether that creates an issue in terms of whether he believes he's just not wanted by Mourinho. And we know if that atmosphere gets toxic, then eventually a decision will have to be made on whether, you know, do you just kind of cut your losses? I can't see Spurs ever taking a loss on him, but do you then start dealing? At the moment, they're swatting away into Milan who want him, and I do wonder at a certain point, if it becomes a bit of a nightmare behind the scenes, do you just think, look, we're actually now jeopardising squad harmony? Personally, it's a pain in the backside, I feel, because then you're letting a player get their way, or perhaps Mourinho, you know. But I think Mourinho's been quite respectful so far of what Levy wants and the club believe. You know, there's people within Tottenham have told me Ndombele is the most talented player at Tottenham right now. And it's just about getting the right attitude out of him, the way he works, and creating an atmosphere where he can thrive. So yeah, let's see what happens there. But yeah, so I've gone slightly off topic there. Skriniar is so apologetic for the way I pronounce names. But yeah, I think he'll be one that Spurs will have a look at. Again, it's about the price and whether Kim Min-jae is a more gettable long-term project for Tottenham. I think Skriniar's a bit older, isn't he? You know, I'd like to see him look at, again, people won't like it, but Ben Godfrey at Norwich, you know. Yeah, he's had a tough season, but most players at relegated clubs do, you know. I think he's 22, he's homegrown, would solve that kind of issue. I think the Spurs have got quite a few numbers in defence right now anyway. You know, at the moment you've got Tanganga, Sanchez, Alderweireld, Dyer. I feel I'm forgetting someone. Well, Foyth, obviously, at the moment as well. Ben Davies can play in the middle as well if needed. Young Malachi Fagan-Walcott's coming through. So it's probably not the most priority position, but if you are going to lose Foyth, then maybe just getting that little bit of extra cover. And I do wonder, spending big money on a centre-back maybe isn't the way to go. So if they could get someone like Ben Godfrey at a decent price, or you go for Kim Min-jae, who is roughly believed to be around the 15 million mark, then I think it makes more sense. Then you've got all the midfielders. I've seen a lot of wingers linked. There's a part of me, you know, I've seen like Leon Bailey linked, Zaha, every window Zaha's linked. Who else have I seen? Leon Bailey, Zaha, Benrahma. Perisic as well, he's another one. I just struggle to see Spurs bring another winger. They may do. I mean, I think a lot of people probably didn't see Bergwijn coming because of the amount of wingers then. But even adding him on top of all of that, I think maybe the only scenario I can see that happen is if they do feel they have to sell someone like Lamela. You know, if Lamela, there's a decent bid comes in, say from Italy, and they look at his injury issues and they think, you know, that's a foreign player off the books. Do we let him go and then bring in another player? Possibly, but I mean, Perisic for me, I think he's another one that's linked every year. I think he's too old in terms of he doesn't fit that profile. I think Zaha's probably time has gone. That's probably 2015 was more the time when Spurs probably were really looking at signing Zaha. Ever since then, I think it's been more pushed from the other side. Leon Bailey's very talented, but again, I think you'd be looking at big money. I think more Spurs will be looking for versatile players that can play in attacking midfield and out on the wing. So, like someone like Iberi, Eze, QPR makes sense. I think the big issue with him is game time. Spurs, Luke Amos looks to be on his way, and I'm sure QPR would like to keep him. So, do you include Amos in a deal for Eze? But then, can you bring him in and play him straight away? Again, homegrown, so ticks that box massively. But as we said with Watkins, it's probably, is he going to get straight into the starting 11? Perhaps not. Is he maybe someone you look to loan out? I'm not a massive fan of bringing him in and loaning him out, to be honest. But certainly he's someone I look at. David Brooks at Bournemouth, another one who I think is a young, I'm pretty sure he's a Wales international, but unlike Davies, he was born in England. I think it was Warrington or something like that. So he doesn't fall under that issue. You know, he'd be homegrown. I'd certainly look at him. I think he's one that Spurs looked at when he signed from Sheffield United, wasn't it, before he went to Bournemouth. Spurs looked then, but then Bournemouth paid the money that Spurs wouldn't for him. And I do wonder whether now with Bournemouth going down, they return and have another little look at him. You know, I know we'd love someone like Jack Grealish. Jack Grealish, Spurs' biggest, to me, disappointment in not pushing for a transfer, probably other than Bruno Fernandes. I think Grealish really proved this season that in the Premier League he's absolutely ready for it. But I just think now that price, especially as Villa didn't go down, is going to be humongous. And I just wonder whether there's other clubs, perhaps others that are struggling with the homegrown stuff, who look at him. And I just think Spurs would be priced out now, which is crazy when you think they could have got him for 24, 25 million. And now you're looking at probably double that. I just don't see how Spurs, unless they sold someone for a decent amount of money, would have the ability to bring him in. And also, I do wonder whether he's a Mourinho player or not. There's a slight bit of me that does wonder about that. I think he works hard, but would he be tactically disciplined? I don't know. Maybe he is. Maybe I'm doing a disservice. I don't know. But Zaniolo, he's the other one. Gets linked a lot from Roma. Young 21-year-old, very talented, young Italian, Italy international. I think his issue is he's had a cruciate ligament injury. He's only come back in the last couple of weeks to go on the bench. I'd be stunned if he's sold. I'm pretty sure I'd heard that Roma have got new money in now and they've made him one of their do not sell players, and that he's very much seen as one for the future. So again, there'll be others. There will be other players linked as well. Like I say, Willian and Coutinho, I think people will have a bit of a moan that Spurs didn't go for him, but Willian, like I said, didn't fit the older player profile that Mourinho made quite clear a few weeks back. And Spurs don't really spend big money on older players in their 30s. Coutinho, some of the details I'd heard about the loan deal. I think it was Kia Gorbachin. God, I'm absolutely murdering the names today, even more so than normal. His agent was saying something about all in. I think the loan deal for Coutinho would work out about £30 million for one season. It's mad. It's just not a Spurs thing to do. He's 28. It's just not the way Spurs operate. And I know that upsets people when I say the way Spurs operate, but it's been going for 20 years, you know. I'm not going to change it. I can't. So, unfortunately, I think we just have to kind of work with it until such time as Spurs are big enough and able to compete with the big boys in that sense. So yeah, I think that's probably, we've covered off the main areas. Some people saying about left back. I think personally, I think he'll be quite happy with his left back at the moment positions, in terms of you've got Ben Davies for the experience, who's a solid player, can play at centre back. Ryan Sessegnon, he eventually wants him to become a left back. Sees similar traits to Ashley Cole. And they've been delighted with Dennis Serkin, very talented young left back, only 18. I think with those three, and you've also got Tanganga can play there at a push, I think he's probably not going to be desperate for a left back. I'd be surprised if they go out and spend money when they're looking to prioritise elsewhere in the pitch. No, I think you're looking at, defensive midfielder. Hopefully they've sorted that with Hojbjerg. And then I think you're looking at right back, striker, potentially an central attacking midfielder, another playmaker if there was one available, a centre back if Foyth goes. I think that's kind of, how many is that? So with defensive midfielder, right back, so I have to count on my fingers like a child. Defensive midfielder, right back, centre back, attacking midfielder potentially, and a striker. So yeah, you're looking at 5 potential, which would be about right. He said, it was a few tweaks. He said it wasn't going to be 10 signings. And he said, they weren't going to spend huge money. He wasn't going to spend £100 million transfers. I think 5 transfers would drastically alter the balance of his Mourinho squad, and also hopefully his first team as well. So let's see. Like I say, Spurs work under the radar a lot. It is the way they operate. Hopefully by the time you've watched this, they'll have announced Hojbjerg. I don't know whether it's going to happen today or tomorrow. They have to go through all the hoops of all the filming stuff, the little videos, the interviews. And like I say, in this case, you've got Walker Peters going the other way, which is sad. I haven't really spoken about that. I may have said it in other ones. Sad to see Kyle Walker Peters go, because I do think he's proving at Southampton he can be a very good right back. And I really would have liked to have seen him given a chance, but it just wasn't under Poch and he wasn't under Mourinho. He just clearly wasn't going to get in. And ultimately, and Levy actually really liked him. It's one of the... Mourinho admitted this, that Levy is quite a big fan of Kyle Walker-Peters, but the player wants to be happy. He wants to play week in, week out, and it looks like Hassan Hüttel's going to give him that chance at Southampton. He's really impressed a lot of people. You can only wish him the best. I've always felt it's been a bit unfortunate in the chances he's had, and when he has made mistakes, like that night in Barcelona, when he let Ousmane Dembele run through. I think so many people focused on a young player making a mistake, but hardly anyone focused on the next hour of the game, where I felt he recovered brilliantly. From a guy that's just had that happen to him in a massive Champions League game, I thought he showed such fantastic mentality. And I'm pretty sure he made one amazing last-ditch tackle, possibly from Coutinho, a Coutinho shot. Vaguely rings a bell. But no one really talks about it because you just remember the bad bits. And I think that's, I think he's going to prove a lot of people that, Spurs, I think, may have made a mistake here. I hope out of this transfer deal, both clubs do well. It's probably the best way. It's not a swap deal for accountancy purposes. It's 2 separate deals. But, I think he's a very talented young guy. And I really hope he becomes an England player one day. Lovely guy to interview as well. Very enthusiastic. Loves Spurs. I think he'll be gutted that his Spurs it didn't happen for him fully there. But no, let's see. Like I say, please keep in mind the homegrown issue when you're drawing up your wish lists of amazing transfers, and also think about players that are going out. I've seen some people saying Sissoko, which I get the logic behind it. I get people get frustrated with him, but a lot of people forgetting he only just signed a new long-term deal this season. He signed they kind of broke the mould of 3 years plus 1 deal extra. So that's 4 years for a player in his 30s, which is very unlike Spurs. That to me doesn't say that they're about to try and sell him the next summer. I think he's too versatile. I think he's a squad player that can fit in. Mourinho says he sees him better out wide. He can play in the middle. He can cover. He even did right back at a push. So I personally wouldn't want to lose him from the squad, because I think he's dominated some big teams on some big European nights, and I think he's more than just the caricature I think some people turn him into. Yeah, his first touch can be horrific. Yeah, like people are saying about Hojbjerg, I wouldn't want him anywhere near a goal, the opposition goal. But in terms of a player that can do the job asked of him, that Pochettino once said, yes, we know Musa can't do some of the things other players can do, but there is no one else in the club like him when it comes to transitions and making Spurs suddenly attack on the counter and winning the ball back. So it'd be interesting. I think Hojbjerg takes a lot of that role off of him, but I wouldn't want to lose him from that squad, I'll be honest with you. But I think there are other players I think they'll look at and will wonder, if we get a decent bid, maybe it does help this rebuilding process. So let's see. Like I say, Hojbjerg in first. Hopefully the start of a few. I've said loads of names there that, you know, some of them are on their list. Some of them are just links that I just kind of wanted to give my opinion on. But it just shows you, in a way, doesn't it, how many links that how many names. I think there was about 22, 23, 24 names that I just read out. Spurs can't sign all of them. And that's the way it works in this kind of football transfer reporting game. You know, there's so many people, so many lists that the scouts have of people they're interested in, but ultimately they're only going to sign a handful of those, if that. So yeah, let's see what happens. Even though I'm off, I'll probably do another video in a week or so. We'll kind of have a look at what's happened so far and what's to come. But plenty to chew over there. By all means, in the comments below, talk about what players you'd like to see. Have a moan about the homegrown issues. I'm sure people will. Have a moan about the money issues. I'm sure you will as well. And yeah, and just let's start talking about next season now. It's all about looking forward. Players return on August the 17th for pre-season training. It's all coming back soon. I'm going to rest up and be ready for everything that comes. So I shall catch you later. Look after yourselves, stay safe, and yeah, I shall talk to you soon. Bye.